guys, and welcome to my home kitchen. It's so good to have you guys back here. Today we're going to be making pizza dough, but most importantly we're going to be talking about the star of pizza dough, which is yeast. Yeast is a microorganism and it's used in most bread baking to help breads rise. We're going to talk a little bit more about how it rises in a minute, but first I want to get you started with what you need for this recipe. You're going to need all-purpose flour, you're going to need sugar, salt. I'm using kosher salt here, but you can use table salt. You're going to need olive oil, and you're going to need 3/4 cup of warm water. Now, it's really important that the water is warm. If you have it too hot, it will kill the yeast. If it's too cold, it won't wake the yeast up. So you kind of have to have it at that perfect temperature, right in between. And you're going to need a separate bowl. This bowl is going to be where you put your finished dough, and it's going to be where the dough rises. So I've already added 2 cups of all-purpose flour into the bowl of my mixer. I'm using a stand mixer for this. It makes it a little bit easier. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can certainly do this. You're still going to add it in a bowl, but you are going to have to knead it by hand. So I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I added 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, and I added 1 teaspoon of the sugar. Now, the sugar is what the yeast is going to eat. Yeast loves sugar, and that's going to basically be the yeast snack. We're going to give it a little reward for doing the work of raising our dough. So I'm going to pour some yeast in my hand just so you can see what it looks like before I put it in. Each little thing is made up of thousands of yeast organisms. Yeast is very tiny. You would need a very powerful microscope in order to see each cell, but it's compacted for bread dough so that you can sprinkle it into your flour mixture. So I'm going to add it all into the flour. Now, in order to wake the yeast up, I'm going to add my warm water. So I'm going to pour the water over the yeast. Now, this is active dry yeast, so it should wake up pretty immediately. As soon as you see those bubbles form, that means that you know that your yeast is alive. Yeast does have an expiration date. If you have very old yeast, most likely it's not going to help to your dough rising. As you can see, those bubbles are forming, and we know that the yeast is waking up. And now we're going to mix our dough. So I'm going to take our dough over to our stand mixer. I have the dough hook attached. I'm going to lower it down. I'm going to lock it. I'm going to put it on stir at first just to start incorporating it. And now I'm going to put it on medium speed. The object here is for my dough to start to clump around the middle of my dough hook. So as soon as that dough starts to clean up all of the flour on the side of the bowl, I know that I'm ready. Now, oftentimes you may have to add a little bit more flour or a little bit more water depending upon your dough. So you just want to keep an eye on it as it's working. You can add a little bit of water as you go if you feel that it needs a little bit more water if the dough is too dry. In reverse, you can also add more flour if you feel that the dough is too wet. But see, as my dough is starting to form together, it's a good sign it's starting to come around that dough hook, which is good. We want to make sure that it's all cleaned up at the bottom. Now, again, you can knead this by hand. It's a little bit more work, and it may take you about 10 minutes of constant kneading. A little bit. I'm going to finish it up. And now that you can see it, it's starting to really start to form into little clumps, which is great. I don't really see a lot of loose flour anymore, which is perfect. So I'm going to shut the mixer off, and I'm going to take my bowl of dough. I'm going to add it all together, And I'm gonna do a little bit of kneading by hand, okay? So just to show you how to knead by hand, you're going to kind of flatten it out. You take half of the dough, roll it over, and in the back of your palm, you're gonna press it in. So again, back of your palm, press it in. You don't have to knead it much. You're just gonna make sure that everything's incorporated and it's a nice silky mass. Now the yeast is going to have the important job of rising this. I'm gonna add a little oil to the bottom of a bowl. I'm gonna add my dough in it and I'll cover it with plastic wrap. Now it's gonna have to sit in a warm place because what's gonna happen is the yeast is going to start eating that sugar. It's going to start releasing carbon dioxide gas. Now because the flour of the dough is going to trap that carbon dioxide gas, it's gonna cause it to rise. And that's how we're going to have the dough rise. Usually it takes about an hour for dough to rise on a warm day. It can take a little bit less depending upon how warm your house is. I wanted to show you what the finished dough looks like after it's risen. So if you can see, this is a dough I made earlier today, and this is a dough that we just made, and see how much it's risen. That's really important. The gluten in the flour is what helps it stretch, and if you can see it, I can start stretching the dough. That means that it has good elasticity, and I'll be able to pull it into like a good pizza shape. And that's it. Later on, I'll show you guys how to make pizza and how to prepare the dough. But for now, you guys can get started on your dough making. Thank you so much and have a great day.